All right, so I need to make sure I say good morning and not good afternoon because I am in North Carolina, so it is the afternoon and lunchtime. So welcome again. I'll reiterate what Maury said. So we're going to welcome you all here today, and hopefully we can provide you some information around the, let me get this off of my, all right, around the your targeted cyclical programmatic monitoring practices. So before I get started, I want to just go ahead and tell you who I am. I'm Amanda Witherspoon. I work with NCSI as well as Cypher at Wested, and I work in the Special Education Practice and Policy Division. And I'm going to go ahead and let my colleagues introduce themselves, and then we can kind of get some things kicked off and get started. Guys?
Hi, everybody. Nicole Garcia here, also from Wested Special Education Policy and Practice Team. And I'm calling in from Washington, D.C., and a former district staff member and also state staff member. So I've been on both sides of the monitoring process. Mari, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Mari Shikazawa. I am a program associate with the Special Education Policy and Practice team at Wested, and also work with Amanda and Nicole on other of the National Technical Assistance Centers. I am in San Diego, California, so it is definitely morning for me, and I'm still working through my second cup of coffee. So bear with me as my energy levels start rising.
Yeah, I always have to remember that because I'm coming from North Carolina in my only state. So I get used to everybody being in different time zones. So yeah. All right. So, and I am in Hickory, North Carolina. I didn't necessarily say that. And most people have never heard of Hickory. So I say I'm in Charlotte. I'm like 45 minutes from Charlotte or something like that. Everybody knows Charlotte. So, all right. Ishwa, you want to introduce yourself? Because you keep us all together and straight.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. I'll turn my video on as well. I'm Ishwa Termizi, and I'm a program assistant at Wested. I'm also close to the DC area in Fairfax, Virginia. Good meeting you all.
Thank you, Ishwa. Okay, so we're going to go through the agenda quickly and just kind of tell you what some things we'll be doing in the next hour. So we're going to be talking about the purpose of the monitoring process. We're going to provide you with an overview of the process, and then reviewing the different components and the pieces on the and the standards around what we'll be looking for during a monitoring visit, and then how to select the team and looking at a file sample. And then we'll talk to you about next steps because we will have day 2 tomorrow. So we'll give you some feedback on that as well at the end of the session. Okay. All right, purpose. So the purpose of the monitoring activities is that, LEAs will be required to participate in a targeted cyclical programmatic monitoring activities next year in the fall of 2022. So through preparation and just kind of getting yourself ready, then you will be able to more meaningfully participate. You'll know what's going to be expected, some items that you're going to need, and just really some things that you're going to be mindful of so you can just really feel like you're prepared and not just like a gotcha. Because a lot of times we kind of get nervous when we hear about monitoring and things like that. But what we're trying to do is kind of give you a quick overview today, but really also in the future to give you some opportunities to really delve in and feel more comfortable. And I always said that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be helping you. We're going to be coaching you. We're going to be providing technical assistance, and we can kind of help you identify some areas that need to be addressed and how you can correct those prior to them becoming, an actual finding. Okay. So overall, Wested's role is that we just assist LEAs to engage in continuous improvement. We can look at areas of noncompliance, like as I mentioned, that that could be addressed prior to any findings. But what we do want to talk about, because we talk about noncompliance all the time, but when we're talking about continuous improvement, we really want to make sure that we keep focused that what we're doing is for students. So we're doing this and we're looking for positive outcomes because sometimes we get, so immersed in what we do day to day that we kind of forget why we're here. So really making sure that we're looking at those results-based outcomes and ensuring that the students are getting what they need. Ishwa, let's see, you can go to the next one, I think. So I've done that one. And then let's get to Wested's role. I'm sorry, I'm just talking and I don't know, I'm just going on. It's the West Edge role. I think it is slide, yeah, right there. So I was just kind of going through, I've already gone through the first two. So like the third ones, we'll help you analyze data patterns. We can advise you on different strategies and things like that to kind of help, improve those outcomes, because we're looking at, the most vulnerable student populations. And again, we're here to provide that coaching and provide that technical assistance. Okay. Next slide.
We're on the next slide, Amanda.
I didn't see it. I was still on the other. I'm sorry. And I got to get used to that because I'm used to trying to navigate and everything too. So I apologize, Ishwa.
No problem.
Just going into a little bit again about, what West Ed's activities are and, what we do and how we'll try to help you get prepared for your monitoring visit. We could look at you reviewing policies and procedures, provide team training on conducting your self-assessments. We can actually look at the results of those assessments and identify and address any potential findings of noncompliance. As I mentioned before. What we do want to say is too that because this is for you all, and although Mississippi Department of Education they're involved in the trainings here, when we actually do the coaching and technical assistance, it'll just be West Ed and in the LEAs, you all. So that'll be a safe space for everyone to just kind of talk through. We'll be looking at different things. We'll delve into any issues or anything that you may have. So we just want to make sure that you have that platform where you're not feeling like you're under pressure or something's going to be made known to MDE. Not that they're a big bad wolf, but we just want to make sure that this is a place where we're going to actually do the work to help you all get prepared. So we just want to make sure that we make that known, and you will be required to at least participate in one of the technical assistance activities. And I think we'll be providing that information, or it has been provided as well in some of the communication. So we'll do that first one, but we do recommend that you sit in on as many as possible and kind of let us really know how we can actually help you all individually as we kind of go through this process of support. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. All right. So this right here is just a quick overview of the timeline here. And as you can see, we're here today. We're doing the program monitoring training, and this is the first session. And we will have session 2 tomorrow. So we'll be doing that training as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll kind of give you some next steps and things to get ready for and prepare for tomorrow's session. And then if you look at the November 22nd through March 31st, that's where we'll be providing those the technical assistance, one-to-one calls, and just really delving into your needs and really looking for how we can support you and get you ready to go. Okay. And before I go and hand it over to, I think it's Nicole, I want to make sure that you know how to communicate with us as we're on the call. And I know you've been dropping in the chat your names and your locations and your districts that you're from. And that'll be a way to continue to communicate throughout the session. You can drop your questions there. And also you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have throughout, because it's kind of formal, but a little informal. So it's kind of really more around the dialogue that we want you to feel comfortable in. Okay.
All right, great. Thanks, Amanda.
It's Nicole. I'm sorry, Nicole. I said Maury.
Oh, no, you're good. You said me. You are right on point. So we're going to start first with providing an overview of MDE OSC's programmatic monitoring process for IDA and how targeted cyclical monitoring is a part of that. Ishwa, if we can move on to the next slide, please. So MDE OSC is responsible for ensuring IDA implementation, which includes monitoring the programmatic and financial activities of Mississippi subrecipients, also known as LEAs, to improve academic and functional outcomes of students with disabilities. Each state's general supervision system highlights the state's accountability for meeting programmatic requirements to monitor IDA implementation and to improve those educational results and functional outcomes of students with disabilities across the state. MDE OSC has revised its programmatic monitoring procedures and processes to implement a cyclical and risk-based monitoring system. This new system is designed to increase that compliance and accountability and to inform technical assistance that leads to the outcomes that we want to see for students. Ishwa, next slide, please. Here's a visual representation of what that tiered method of monitoring looks like. Starting at the bottom, we have universal monitoring that's completed by all LEAs each year, which includes the IDA project application review, data review for the state performance plan and annual performance report due by MDE to the Office of Special Education Programs, our federal partners each year in February, LEA determinations, dispute resolution, and the annual risk assessment. Targeted cyclical monitoring is our center, and that's what we're talking about today. And this is for some LEAs each year. Intensive risk-based monitoring is completed for a few LEAs annually by MDE OSE. Ishwa, one more slide, please. So targeted cyclical monitoring is based on sequential sampling, which creates a cohort model on a 5-year cycle. Activities include a self-assessment completed by the LEA, corresponding desk audit completed by MDE OSE, and technical assistance is provided across the entire continuum. Some benefits of having targeted cyclical monitoring is that each LEA is monitored at least once every 5 years, and the self-assessment process can guide an internal review by the district before the state comes in and completes their desk audit. Ishwa, one more slide now. So now we're going to jump into what the components are for the self-assessment and talking a little bit more broadly about what the self-assessment process is. Before the LEA begins working on the self-assessment, there are some key activities that should be completed, which include selecting a team who knows the components and who knows the requirements and typical policy and procedure that's done within the LEA and what the state expects, identifying a sample of student files for review, and then preparing to conduct the self-assessment by reviewing MDE OSE's timelines, templates, and resources. We'll go a bit deeper into each of these pre-monitoring activities in a few minutes. There are 6 components included within the self-assessment, and each include a specific set of standards or review questions that are included to measure compliance. The number of standards in each component are included on the slide, and we'll review some of these in more depth tomorrow during session 2. The components within the self-assessment are child find, LRE, IEP, discipline, secondary transition, and early childhood special education. One more slide, Ishwa. This screenshot shows a sample score sheet for one component, LRE. These score sheets are provided for each component and correspond with the summary results form on the next slide. You'll see on the far right here that we've included the IDA citation or regulation for each corresponding record review item. So we're always going to try and pull these back to what the regulation states and what the expectation is within the IDA. When calculating compliance, we're going to use a simple formula for each standard. We're going to take the number of yeses, or the number of student files that are a yes where evidence was found, divided by the total number of files that were reviewed, excluding files that were not applicable, giving your percent compliant. So if you have 4 students who were a yes, and you had a total of 5 files that were reviewed, your compliant rate is 80%, showing that that one extra student who was a no will need to be corrected. We hope that reviewing data on the student and district level will lead to planning for improvement in any isolated incidents of noncompliance, like an issue with a specific student, or systemic noncompliance, like every student in a district has an issue, every student in one building or in one grade level is found to be noncompliant. And we also hope that this will lead to address root causes that could lead to continued noncompliance over time. And we also wanted to highlight some changes to educational entities and the responsibilities of LEAs who place the students there. For each student placed by an LEA in an educational entity, the LEA is responsible for child find, evaluations and reevaluations, participating in and ensuring maintenance of IEPs, any responsibilities identified for the LEA included with an MOU with the entity, and ensuring that each student with a disability placed outside of the district is afforded a FAPE. You'll see within the file sample selection, callouts to include these students who've been placed by the district outside of the district in educational entities to be included in the file selection. And one more slide. Following your team submission of the completed self-assessment to MDE OSE in school year 22-23, we're highlighting some post-monitoring activities that might be included. There may be a need for developing a corrective action plan. MDE OSE will provide a monitoring report with findings, if applicable, and recommendations within 60 days of their completion. And each finding of noncompliance identified must be corrected in a timely manner and in no case greater than 1 year from the date of identification. Any findings not addressed will prompt the use of enforcement mechanisms by MDE OSE and can include technical assistance, additional restrictions on IDEA funds, or requiring an ed benefit review or other monitoring activities and improvement activities. And now we're going to pass over to Mari, I think, to share some information on how to prepare for this.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Before we get into the preparation, does anyone have any questions about the monitoring process as it was laid out? In the reminder email yesterday, you all should have received the current programmatic monitoring procedure. So we hope that you had a chance to take a peek at that. But, if you have any questions about any of the more specifics regarding any of those components, that's a great reference to refer to. And of course, we are here in technical assistance and coaching capacity to walk you through any of those pieces too. So seeing that, now we're going to dive into preparing to conduct the self-assessment. Thank you so much. So again, we sent out the programmatic monitoring protocol and procedures yesterday. And within that document, we've included a checklist to help organize your team before jumping into the actual self-assessment. So the first item is the special education director selects team members to participate in the self-assessment process. We're going to discuss how you may consider selecting a team in the coming slides. So we'll come right back to this issue. The second is conducting an initial meeting with team members to discuss process timelines and assign responsibilities. And this piece is really important to think through because it really sets up the process to ensure that the self-assessment is completed on time and delegates responsibilities to all those team members. This is not a task for one person, as if you've had a chance to look at the protocol or even after hearing Nicole's overview of the protocol, we know that this can be a lot of work and time consuming, especially if we want to make it a meaningful activity. So distributing responsibilities really across team members will help to make the process a lot more manageable and more meaningful. Next, we have identifying student files to review. And this is an area that we found a lot of LEAs actually struggled with during last year's pilot. So we're going to discuss this a lot more in depth in the coming slides and different implications for selecting different student files and ways that, again, that we can make this both meaningful, but also ensure the best results within your LEA. The next is to then complete the required self-assessment. So again, through those distributed roles, you'll potentially be assigning specific student files or specific components within the protocol for team members to review those requirements. And then you will convene a review team meeting to discuss the results. And this is when those discussion questions, and I don't think we talked too much about that, but within the protocol that we sent out yesterday, there's discussion questions after each of those components. So this is where coming together and going over those discussion questions would be a really great place to dig in. So we're looking at what is the data telling you, and not only in terms of compliance, even though we know that within monitoring, there is this inherent focus on compliance, but really how do we improve the quality of IEP for our students and what trends are we seeing? So this could help to identify specific professional development or training from MDE, who is available, to provide any specific individualized trainings that you guys request, or other parties within your LEA. So it might be helpful to have one team come and present and share knowledge with other people more broadly or externally if you use external consultants to help provide that professional development. Next is compile results and summary. So this is generally the responsibility of one person within the team. What would happen is that all of the team members would send all of their results, and then they would compile it into those summary sheets that Nicole just previewed on a previous slide. And it might be really helpful to compile these results actually prior to convening the team meeting. It's definitely up to the LEA, because if you're looking at the data in an aggregate way, then we can see across the LEA what patterns are sticking out, where are we finding significant findings of noncompliance, how do we differentiate between just those individual areas of compliance, or whether it's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. And if you do choose to compile those results before, we definitely recommend that you review it again to ensure that they're correct. And just in case through those conversations you find that maybe somebody is not necessarily grading in the same way that, consistently across the LEA. And then finally, there is submitting the actual self-assessment to MDE OSC, and that is Teresa's team, all of the wonderful programmatic monitoring folks that we have over there. And at this point, maybe you throw a pizza party or a coffee party or something because you want to celebrate because the process is finally over. And any questions before we move to the next slide? Thank you, Ashok, for putting that in the chat. Please feel free just to unmute. This is, a training, but also like a conversation that we want to have with you all. Or feel free to include anything in the chat.
No problem. Mari, somebody was just asking if we can drop a link for the procedures document or the PowerPoint. And I know we're going to be sharing the PowerPoint in a follow-up email sometime next week. And we can reshare the procedures document as well. But I don't think there's a link for it that we could share, right?
No, there isn't a link that we can share right now. Our apologies. We should have thought through that on the front end, but you all should have received an email yesterday that included both the procedures as well as a redacted IEP that we'll be using for our activity tomorrow. We're going to preview and talk a little bit more about what that activity is going to look like at the end of the call. But we will go ahead and resend both the procedures and the redacted IEP after this call. If you did not receive it in your mailbox, please feel free to put your email in the chat, or send a private chat to me if you don't want to share your email with the entire group, and we can make sure that you're included on that email list.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Oh no, that's perfect. Thanks, Ishwa. Okay, so the next slide, how do we select a team? So first, we need to identify a team leader to oversee the self-assessment process. And this does not need to be the special education director within the LEA. In fact, it's highly likely that it's not going to be. So although the SPED director is going to be and should be an integral team member in this process, again, just realizing how much time and effort it takes to coordinate all of these activities, it might make more sense to put somebody else in the role of like leader or captain of this specific activity. However, this person really should be knowledgeable around all requirements, because again, they're going to be that person that other folks will come to ask questions if they're not sure about how to rate something, or they don't know how to interpret what was included within the IEP. It's better to have a one point person that they can check in with. And then we're going to select a team of individuals to conduct the review. And the team should be individuals from multiple disciplines. And this can include the special education teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, behavior interventionists, general education teachers, school psychologists, related services personnel, principal or assistant principals. And it's important to note that we really want to get people who are involved in the IEP process, people who will benefit from seeing the data, who might be able to enact change within their local school or within the LEA as a broader entity. So there's just a few things to keep in mind, and some additional tips are included on the next slide. Thank you. So the additional tips that we would like you to consider include identifying staff that are knowledgeable about the requirements. So again, most of those positions listed on the prior slide should be knowledgeable about the requirements, because in many cases they would be involved in the IEP process, and some who may have less experience. So again, those people that might benefit from just understanding the requirements a little bit deeper so that they're more meaningfully able to participate in those IEP meetings. So that could include, for example, last year we heard that engaging principals was actually a really beneficial activity that they engaged in, because it can help the principals understand the IEP requirements and help them to lean into the IEP meetings that they participate in. So again, they can be kind of like this broker and was it like gatekeeper to make sure that the IEPs are in compliance, and also thinking through how to improve those functional results and quality pieces for the IEP. The next, again, is selecting a team leader. So once again, just want to really reiterate this. I know there was some confusion around who needs to be the team leader, and this does not need to be the SPED director, but again, they really should be knowledgeable about requirements to be seen as the person to go to ask questions and check and verify data and information. They also should be a person that has the time available to really commit and engage in these activities. We also recommend that the team leader does a spot check of files and results upon the receipt of all the results from those IEP reviews to ensure that the data reported to MDE is correct. And one piece that we didn't really touch too much on is that once you guys submit your completed self-assessment to MDE, MDE will actually request a sample of files from all of you to verify your results. So they'll be going through and checking, you know, is the discipline data correctly reported? And this will include both IEPs for students that are marked 100% compliant, as well as those that are designated as there are some issues of non-compliance. And this is really a way for MDE to verify the quality of the review. So on the front end, it might be helpful to have your leader do that spot check just to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that you feel confident in the data that you are submitting to MDE. Because if MDE finds that the data is not correct or it doesn't have the same results as when they've conducted their self-assessment, there's going to be additional conversations, additional work. The self-assessment, for, I think, speaking for everyone at MDE, again, it's not supposed to be a gotcha. It's really supposed to be a reflective activity where you can identify these areas. So if there are findings of non-compliance, don't feel like you need to lie in order to, you know, to seem like you're doing everything right. We know how hard it is to comply with all of the different requirements within IDEA. There's a lot of requirements, we know, but really it's to help you identify areas for training. And of course, you know, the corrections of non-compliance are really important pieces just to make sure that students are receiving the services that they need. It's not, you know, as much a reflection of the district. So the next is review policies, procedures, or student files for evidence. So we say yes if evidence to support full implementation of the specific standard is included. And we've included within the self-assessment some evidence of what that might look like, as well as no if you're unable to validate full implementation. For specific standards, you'll also notice that there is an NA selection. So it could be that the item might have been considered, but it just isn't applicable to the student. And we recommend doing this activity as a team, similar to the process that we'll do tomorrow. So as part of your training, we recommend potentially going through a single student file and looking at each of the criteria and showing what you mean when you're saying this is in compliance, this is not in compliance. How do we know that? How can we make linkages between different areas within the IEP, again, to make this a more meaningful activity? And also it's really to ensure inter-rater reliability. We know that some of the items might be confusing. You're like, oh, I see part of it's here, but not part of it. What does that mean? So we want to make sure that we're rating or grading and reviewing these IEPs with a similar lens. Next is record results on the results summary form. So each team member can record results on the results summary form. So each team member can use individual templates to record their results. And then usually it's the team leader that can transfer them into the larger summary forms, again, to look at those larger, broader patterns across the LEA. And then lastly, maintain supporting documentation. And this is really important because, again, MDE is going to come back and they're going to take a peek at a sample of your sample to verify that what you are reporting is in fact what they are also seeing. And let's see if okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I did get some private chats from folks who did not receive the email with the protocol and the IEP. So we'll make sure that we include you guys in the follow-up email. If anybody else has not received the protocol or the IEP, then please do feel free to send me a private chat and we can get your name and information written down. Any questions about these tips? Again, these are just suggestions. These are not requirements. So definitely within your purview. Great. Ishwa, if we could go to the next slide. So how do we know how many files we need to pull? And I feel like this is $1 million question, right? LEAs always have questions like, how many files am I actually going to need to pull? And prior to conducting the self-assessment, MDE will actually identify for you all the most recent child count numbers to determine how many files that you will need to be pulling. So don't worry, that's not something that you're going to have to calculate yourself. And the LEA must select a targeted sample of student files for LRE, IEP, discipline, secondary transition, and ESCE. So you'll notice that that aligns obviously with the components that are included within the self-assessment. And we'll get into a little bit more about the requirements for each of those categories in just a few slides. Also, that the sample files selected should be a reasonable representation of students with disabilities within the LEA. With that said, and I don't know, a Mississippi staff, maybe cover your ears, but this is a technical assistance and professional development training where we just want you to be fully aware of the flexibilities that are offered to you. So MDE allows this flexibility for you to select your own student files, and a lot of states do not allow this flexibility. They will go in and they'll pick the student files that they want to review. So for the purpose of the actual self-assessment, that's going to be submitted to MDE, and that is not the self-assessment activities that you'll be doing with us as part of your actual cyclical targeted programmatic monitoring. It might be helpful for the team leader or a team of folks to do a review of the files to help select your best files, right? I hope we're reading between the lines here. So again, you have this flexibility. It's a fantastic flexibility, and it's to help you guys really to both take advantage of the self-assessment, because through that review, you will notice some patterns of where you might see non-compliance, but also to understand that, okay, you guys, you might not want to pick every single file that you find that has a few areas of non-compliance, if that makes sense. But for the purpose of this exercise, for the purpose of participating in TA and professional development with WestEd, we recommend that you go out of your comfort zone and select those student files that are most likely to help inform practices, trainings, and target historically marginalized student groups, and really improve the quality of the IEPs and the services that you're providing to the students. I know that at the end of the day, that's everyone's goal that's here. You have dedicated your lives to serving these student populations. And we know that students with disabilities are very complex students due to a lot of intersecting identities. So that can be their disability category, their race, their economic status, and a whole other slew of pieces that come into play when trying to provide the best education for these students to meet their varying needs. So we might say, all right, we know that within this school, there's a lot of EL students. Let's pick a couple EL students. Let's see, that they're also students with disabilities. Let's see, like, what are the results showing us? How can we provide better services for these students? Because we know that there's a large population of them. So there's just a bunch of ways to think through identifying the sample. Ishwa, if we go to the next slide. So again, the purpose of a sample is to make it a representative sample, and specific criteria is included as part of the monitoring procedures. Within the document that we sent out. So now these are the required criteria, and we're going to discuss again ways to enhance that sample in the following slides, but the sample must include the following if available within the LEA. And again, one student file might meet multiple criteria. So that's really important to note. You might have a student for LRE, IEP, discipline, and secondary transition, and that's fine. We just want to make sure that all of these categories are included. So students with an initial evaluation and placement within the past year, that should be approximately 10% of your sample. Students who turned 3 during the past year, again, 10% of the sample. Students age 14 and older pursuing a regular and alternate diploma. So these are those students that would qualify for those secondary transition. pieces, 10% of the sample. Students who participated in the alternate assessment.
Teachers in a different place.
Sorry. Students who participated in the alternate assessment, at least one file. We realized there shouldn't be a large population of students who are participating in the alternate assessment. If the LEA was identified as having a significant discrepancy in suspensions and expulsion rates, indicator 4A, as we know it, that's reported through the state performance plan to the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services annually. So that's why, we take a focus on specific areas that we're reporting out to the federal government on. So students who are suspended or expelled for 10 or more days, that should be 10% of your sample if applicable. Hopefully that is not the case and that you only have a select few number of student files. If the LEA was identified as having significant disproportionality, at least one student from each race, ethnicity group, and area of disproportionality identified. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the upcoming slides as well, because again, given that this is not a formal self-assessment, you're not going to have to submit your results to MDE. This might be an area that you choose to lean into if you were identified as having significant disproportionality. And then lastly, students placed in alternate settings used by the LEA if applicable. So this will also include those educational entities that Nicole was talking about. And again, I'm sure you all are aware about this, but a little context too is obviously you guys went through a revision of your definition of LEA for the purposes of special education. So really you guys are kind of resuming responsibility for some of those kids, which is why they're going to be of increased importance in the following years or, in the next couple cyclical monitoring cycles, as well as for intensive. So just be aware that that is on MDE's radar, and obviously ensuring the correct oversight for those students is going to be a priority. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So the sample should also include, to the extent possible, students from different disability categories. So again, we want a really representative sample, students with a range of age and grade levels. So part of that is dictated through the required the requirements that we just went over above. But again, we just want to encourage a really wide span of students so that you guys are seeing things from a bird's eye view. And lastly, students named in a formal state complaint or due process in the last year. So obviously we want to make sure that we're addressing any of those areas that have been identified as needing additional attention. I'm sure that as part of the formal state complaint or due process, you guys have reviewed those IEPs ad nauseum. But again, looking at them the subsequent year when they're after their next IEP meeting will be really helpful in helping to inform and kind of understand what's going on. So again, the goal of the self-assessment is really to look at a broad range of students to help identify those specific areas where additional training is needed. And again, it is really not meant to be a gotcha from the state, but to allow time for self-reflection with the ultimate purpose of improving these results for these students with disabilities within your LEA. And again, I think that it's really important to note that this is why MDE is investing so heavily on the technical assistance on the front end. So we really encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities with WestEd as we're presenting them, because this is not a formal piece of your monitoring activity. This is something for you guys to engage in to improve your own systems and services. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so again, we're continuing on this representative sample, and I think that we'll probably beat this one into the ground because there's so many ways that we can think about this. But if the LEA wants to further explore the impact of non-compliance on outcomes for students with disabilities, the students may include students attending each school in the LEA. So if all schools are not represented, include students from schools with both low and high rates of placement in general education settings and low and high assessment scores for students with disabilities. So again, this will kind of give you a greater purview of what's going on as a system as a whole. Also, try to include students who are failing 2 or more subjects. Those students are going to be really important for identifying any areas that potentially could be addressed to improve those services. Any, again, triangulation of the data where needs are overlapping with outcomes, as well as students that have repeated a grade. So understanding what's included in their IEP, how are their goals linked to their PLAF, and their objectives, and what does this look like? It doesn't make sense. Is there a disconnect there? Students attending schools with the highest percentage of discipline removals, both in and out of school. So of greater than 10 days in a school year. And again, this is really important with an IDA, both for reporting to OSAP, also for determinations around significant disproportionality, and for improving functional outcomes for students. Because if a student is being removed for more than 10 days in a school year, it's definitely something that should be elevated to attention within the school, within the LEA. And I think that this is a really good and proactive way for the LEA to better understand which are the schools that are doing this and how do we put interventions in place to make sure it doesn't happen. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, as it's written in bold and underlined, this is really an opportunity to understand and use your data to make data-driven decisions. And on the bottom, we wrote low and high stakes. And the reason why is this opportunity is low stakes because there is a likelihood that your lowest performing subgroups will have more non-compliance. And if that's not what you're seeing, then we need to have a different conversation that we're more than willing to have. But also this, and it's low stakes because you're not going to be reporting that non-compliance to the state. That's just for self-reflection and analyzing and determining how to make improvements for those students. And it's also high stakes because this is a really rare opportunity to analyze your data in different ways to improve those outcomes. So again, it's low and high. I know when anything has to do with students, it's high stakes, but definitely low in the way that you're not going to be held accountable for non-compliance. This is an opportunity for you to focus on those areas of non-compliance and fix it before it becomes a potential finding. And then lastly, we really want you to focus on lowest performing subgroups. So looking at race, disability category, socioeconomic status, and all of those other factors, especially if your LEA is identified for significant disproportionality. And we'll have a list of those LEAs that are identified for significant disproportionality before our TA call so that we can also discuss this a little bit more in depth, and that can definitely be part of our technical assistance. So what you find through the self-assessment really might help you to inform your root cause analysis and interventions that can impact inequities within your system. Even if you're not identified for significant disproportionalities, this really is a great opportunity to focus on those low performing subgroups because again, you really don't have that much time built in for self-reflection or, MDE facilitating and paying for providers to come in to really look at your data with you to determine ways that we can move the needle and improve those services for all students, especially those that have been marginalized. And obviously it's a thing that happens across the state. This is not specific to Mississippi or anything. So we're not calling anybody out because we know that everyone has the best of intentions and this is really hard work. So by taking advantage of this opportunity, you're really taking the first step in just recognizing and being open to moving forward and making changes that can make sustaining impacts. Okay, sorry, Ishwa, next slide. And now I'm going to pass it to Amanda. Oh, wait, excuse me. Does anyone have any questions about the preparation process? Okay, and I know that that was a lot of information and probably way too much of me talking. So I will pass it to Amanda, but feel free to include any questions in the chat.
Yeah, it was a lot. Thanks, Maury. A lot to take. It's real quick. We had an hour, so we wanted to make sure we got through it as much of the PowerPoint as possible. But I just did want to reiterate the importance of reaching out to us for the TA and opportunities to look through your work and your content. So targeted timeline. Now, next slide, Ishma. And also, if you hear my ice maker, I've been waiting on ice all day and now it's making ice. So if you hear that, I apologize ahead of time. And so first, I want to let everyone know this is like tentative in every word. So this is the timeline is going to be, flexible because what we'll be doing is following the lead of MDE. They'll be making you all aware of any changes and adjustments and the specific timing of your submissions and all that information. So we wanted to make sure that you understood that, ahead of time. So it's not necessarily written in stone. It's probably going to be some moving parts, but you will be informed. So if we look at the first one, the coaching and the TA to prepare you for the monitoring, that's happening now. We'll start with the training and then moving forward with your the one required TA session that you'll go through with us, as well as any ongoing sessions that you deem fit. So that'll be happening from now, November 2021 through March 2022. Around August 2022, LAs are notified by the MDE of their monitoring schedule. September 2022, MDE provides training to the LEAs. We're going to the November, December 2022, LEAs will submit their self-assessments. MDE will provide that preliminary report, and that'll be around January, February 2023. Then February through March 2023, the LEAs will respond to the preliminary report, and then sometime around April, May 2023, MDE will issue the final monitoring report. So like I said, once again, it is a tentative timeline, but it's just something to just provide you with a range and just kind of have things on your radar. And one thing I mentioned in the last 4 items on the timeline is because it spans across 2 months. And that's because the self-assessment dates will be staggered. But again, MDE will let you know of any of those, of any information that you'll need. Okay, next slide, Ishma. Thank you. So we're to the point where there are any questions. We're going to do Q&A if necessary. We have a few more minutes. We have about 10 minutes that we can entertain any questions that you have at this point. I don't know, Tim, do we see any in the chat that's been added? I didn't.
Nothing in the chat, Amanda. Doesn't look like. Mari, do you have any direct messages to Elevate?
No, I do not. But while we're waiting for folks to jump in and ask their questions or type them in the chat, I just really want to quickly talk a little bit about the TA. And I know that Amanda talked about it, the beginning of the session, but now that you've heard a little bit of the process, just again, to elevate those pieces that Amanda was talking about, our technical assistance model is really modeled after what MDE does with its LEAs. So again, there's this universal type training. So that would be both the trainings that we're providing today and tomorrow, as well as any policy and procedure review. So you'll notice that the child find component actually within the protocol is a review of your actual policies and procedures. So at a minimum, if that's something you want to engage with, you'd be able to submit your child find procedures to us. We could review them, provide feedback, identify any areas for weaknesses or improvements. And again, everything we say is just suggestions. The next piece is a little bit more targeted. So in that targeted review, there's kind of 2 different tracks you could take. One would be we could actually help you to prepare for the self-assessment. So help you identify your team, identify your files. The other track, in addition to that, would also include potentially conducting an inter-rater reliability training like we're going to be doing tomorrow. So you'll have a lot more firsthand experience with what that would look like after tomorrow's session. And then the most intensive track that we have to offer for technical assistance would actually include, after and universal and targeted, we would then have you conduct a self-assessment with a smaller sample potentially, or as many files as you would like to review. And then we would review that with you, as well as looking at the files to denote any discrepancies and identify and help you address any findings of potential findings of non-compliance, because they're not going to be non-compliance. Again, we're not going to be letting Mississippi know anyone's dirty laundry. If you were on the physical training, the way that Anthony says it is, it's like a virtual Vegas. It's not a real Vegas, unfortunately. We wish we could all go to Vegas, but it's like a virtual Vegas. So what happens in our calls stays within our calls, and at a minimum, or at a maximum, what we would relay to Mississippi is just trends that we're seeing across LEAs. So without identifying any specific LEAs.
Mari, we have one question. Somebody asked, will we receive the standards/expectations in our next meeting?
Yes. So all of the standards are actually included. And this leads us to our next slide. Ishwa, if you want to go to the next slide, and actually this doesn't really lay it out very well, but Amanda, did you want to talk a little bit about our activity for tomorrow?
Yeah, I can go ahead and talk about that. And so I think now we did send some things out in an email, but I don't know if anything will be going out today. So if you all want to chime in on that. But what in preparation for tomorrow's session, you print out the information and have that available for the targeted for the self-assessment, because we'll be going through that, as well as the student sample with the redacted IEP there. So we'll be going through those things tomorrow. So you will have an opportunity to kind of look at the standards and, you know, kind of get an idea around the expectations in the next training. So if those are the two things that you could have, so we can be prepared for tomorrow, and we'll go into more detail around the information.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So yeah, again, if you guys have time tonight, it probably would be helpful just to do a quick review of the targeted cyclical self-assessment. So it's an appendix within the procedures. So again, it lays out all of the different standards and expectations for your teams. And we'll be sending that out after this call as with an additional reminder. So we'll just call it follow-up and materials so that you don't get it confused with all the other reminder emails we've been sending. And thanks for your patience, as you know, you never know how many reminders you need to send out. We're still figuring out that type of etiquette. But again, and then if you have time to also review the redacted student IEP, this is a real IEP from Mississippi. So we selected one that was reviewed by the MDOSE team this year, and that was reviewed. So we've pulled out each of the components as well as the sections within the IEP that you should be looking to answer these questions. And then we have some discussion questions. So again, like for our purposes, we're not just looking at compliance. Compliance is a very important piece, and it's the bare minimum, de minimis, like you have to meet compliance. But beyond that, right, we're trying to look at how do we actually improve the quality and improve outcomes for students. And we have another question in the chat. So pulling a team from many different campuses and job responsibilities, would paying a supplement for the team to meet after hours or on weekends be appropriate? Is it an appropriate use of federal funds? So I will say, I believe that it is an appropriate use of funds to provide a supplement for additional activities, as long as they are outside of their current job scope.
Yes.
So that would not be an issue, but and obviously you would have to document time and effort and a lot of those other fiscal pieces. So if that is an avenue that you want to move into, feel free to reach out to Bobby and the fiscal team, and we can talk a little bit more about what you would need to make sure is in place, just to make sure that you're compliant with the fiscal piece too. I know, right? Nothing can be easy, but as long as you're documenting it, what the responsibilities are going to be, again, the time and effort, and that it is outside of their general work scope, then it would definitely be an appropriate use of funds. Any other questions? I know, and the great news is you've got some ARP IDEA funds. So this is technically like a professional development opportunity. It's kind of like a modified ed benefit review. We're not quite going to be going as in depth as an actual ed benefit review, but that is, you know, the next level would be that. And I know that Teresa and her team have an ed benefit review template. So if that's something you want us to look over with you, then that's definitely something that we can do as well. I mean, not do it with you, but we can include that as part of, you know, this is the process and here's how you would take what we're doing to the next level, just to be clear on what I'm saying. Any other questions?
I don't see any here in the raw chat. I don't know if anybody's received any individually.
Yeah, I don't have.
And we know that this is a lot of information, so you might need to have time to let it sink in. Yes, exactly. Tomorrow will be another call, so we'll probably open it up and leave a few minutes on the front end. So if you guys have any questions between now and then, feel free to jot those down, and we'll give you guys a few minutes after you've digested all of this information to ask any additional questions. And again, you guys are required to participate in at least one 30-minute technical assistant call. And there's a lot of different tracks, and we're just talking about the programmatic tracks for technical assistance, but during those calls, we'll be talking about the larger technical assistance opportunities available for each of your LEAs. And after that, it's definitely up to you in terms of how you want to leverage us, but just know that we're here as thought partners.
All right. Well, I want to extend our appreciation for your time today and participation for this important work. As Mari had mentioned, again, around the TA calls, I think now in the email, I think Ishwa, is that information in there as far as them to sign up for the session?
Yeah,
At
we've
least
shared
initial?
yeah, we've shared a link and we're going to share it again in the follow-up emails we're going to send.
All right, we'll get to the next slide. I think this is the last one, and this is our contact information, and that would be what you use if you want to reach out to any of us with any questions or whatever, even after tomorrow. So, and then the PowerPoint will be shared, I think sometime next week, as Ishwa had said. So we will wrap it up unless anybody else has anything else. All right.